First, I'll introduce Cin Salach, who's going to read first. Cin is a well-known Chicago poet on both the page and the stage. She's an Illinois Arts Council recipient, a 4-time Ragdale Fellow, and an Emmy nominee for her work on the PBS documentary From Schoolboy to Showgirl. Cin has collaborated with musicians, filmmakers, and artists for over 25 years in such groups as the Loofah Method, Betty's Mouth, and 10 Tongues. That always makes me smile. She's the author of 2 collections of poetry, A Soft Place to Land and When I Am Yes. I don't do that. Oh, okay. A Soft Place to Land and When I Am Yes, which was just released this summer by Jackleg Press. Cin will be followed by 2 more poets who are well known on the Chicago poetry scene, Quraysh Ali Lansana and Christopher Stewart. Quraysh Ali Lansana is author of 8 poetry books, a children's book, and the editor of 8 anthologies. Our Difficult Sunlight, A Guide to Poetry, Literacy, and Social Justice was a 2011 NAACP Image Award nominee. A former professor of creative writing at Chicago State University, Lansana also served as director of the Gwendolyn Brooks Center for Black Literature and Creative Writing from 2002 until 2011. He's the co-author of The Walmart Republic with Christopher Stewart, which was released last month. And finally, Christopher Stewart's poetry has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. He's also collaborated with a range of musical artists and was a founding member of the poetry music ensemble Circadian Rhythm. He's co-author with Quraysh Ali Lansana of The Walmart Republic. Currently, he serves on the faculty of the Graduate School of Library and Information Science at Dominican University. So the agenda tonight is first Cin will read, then Quraysh and Christopher, then there'll be a time for Q&A, and then their books are available in the back for signing. So please join me in welcoming Cin Salach.
Thank you, Tom. Songs swan and swoon. I am not sure how to dance abandon, tame gin. To just float on my back, breathing is new. I am still unknowing this. Flowers are next, 3, 2, 1. I am moving, I come undone. The stillness here moves me. I see the glass, negative crash of the flat bay. I see it is stone. I lay myself in a sky as flat as the bay. I pick up each stone and hold it in my mouth. Nothing is moving. I learn each stone on the shore, but I am flying. I come to the shore. The tide makes its way to the rock. I sell the house. The rock makes its way to the body. I relinquish the keys. The body makes its way to her. Negotiating? I say yes. Here's my nose, my elbow, my grief. Here's my molar, my cheekbone, my crazy. Here's my spine, my buttocks, my anger. Here's my belly, my thigh, my sweet. Here's my ankle, my shoulder, my thinking. Here's my help, my hard, my hair. Here's my hamstring, my vocal, my thumb. Here's my bladder, my eyes, my fail. Here's my hysteria, my old, my moon. Here is my baby. My dreams bring me down to the water. If I close my eyes just after waking, the images come back. I am scrambling down a rocky hill to reach the water. I am climbing over hundreds of sunbathers to reach the water. I am running away from my brother, father, husband to reach the water. I am ignoring all posted signs to reach the water. And when I reach the water, it's daylight. But the water is so dark. I find a place I know is safe, and I slip in and I swim. I swim well. efficient and slippery, but always on the lookout, always peering under with my goggles, always keeping an eye on the shore, horizon, rock that might not really be a rock. And I swim, and I keep swimming until I am awake. To make something with your own hands, to love your body, to see the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to want the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to touch the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to feed the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to taste the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to know the body of the one you love, to make something with your own hands, to love your body, to love the body of the one you love. Hi, I'm Cin. Thank you. And I just want to thank Tom for inviting me, and I'm really honored to be here with Chris and Quraysh. And I'm going to be reading mostly poems from the new book, When I Am Yes. And the next poem I'm going to read, some of you, some students, yes? Some students? You might have read a couple of these. We were asked to send some along. This was a poem that I wrote. I had a really great writing group. If you're a writer, you often are by yourself a lot, or at least I am, and I like that. Every once in a while, though, it's nice to kind of see what everyone else is doing. And I had this wonderful writers group, and we decided to make our group, we challenged each other to write in forms, and we often made up the form itself that we were going to be writing in. We had one of our favorite members had to leave the group, and so we challenged ourselves. We made up a form. It was the convince him to come back to our group form. So, so this was my poem to do that. Your Tender Ear, Chris Green. Dear Chris, I wrote an entire poem to you while I was checking email last night. Another while I was giving Leo a bath and reading him stories. Another after I loaded the dishwasher and pushed the start button. You would have been impressed. But I did not actually write them. They wrote themselves in and out of my head before I could find fingers, pen, paper, and one toddler-free second to bring them all together. Ah, dear Chris. I just typed 2 lines I wish were as good as the ones I wrote in the non-existent poems last night, but they weren't, so I deleted them. It is still me and you waiting for poetry to find us. Dear Chris, nothing is a clock. The middle of the night doesn't always mean sleep. The morning doesn't always mean there won't be a table full of open wine bottles on your front sidewalk. And it's Sunday. What does that mean? Every time I start a new paragraph, a little icon pops up and tells me it looks like I'm writing a letter. And do I need help? No. I just typed letter with 3 T's, and it was corrected by my computer unprompted. Yes. Yesterday, I got an email from my oldest best friend. 44 years ago, our parents bought houses across the street from each other. She wrote that the day before, she had come home from running errands to find her firstborn son, 21 years old, dead in his room. She had the caramel ice cream that he had requested before she left. I broke into sobs. I kept breaking into them. Her tender email held me. I looked at pictures of her 2 boys when Leo and I visited her in her suburban home just last month. I couldn't imagine Leo that big. I remember when your girls turned 2, Chris. I asked how it felt to be the father of 2 2-year-olds. You answered, they're still alive. I smiled. You said, I'm serious. Everything is unprecedented. Everything has happened. How does that work? It is unprecedented that I am the mama of a 20-month-old boy asleep in the next room. This breaking is how we let the light in. That's what Leonard Cohen sings, but it's not the light I'm trying to let in. Dear Chris, no, I don't need help writing this letter. I once was in love with a woman who was very good at letting in the dark, and she left me with some great skills for doing just that, but I've gotten rusty. The weather today is light enough to let the dark float inside, soft and black and unflinching. I float inside both of them as I pour unfinished wine into the sewer in our street and bag up the empty bottles. I see a small sweatshirt, boys, and little shoes, girls, left on different porches, memories of last night's block party. It is hard to match everything up in the pitch of darkness, especially small things to small things. Much easier to wait for the light. Waiting, sin. So it worked. He came back to the group. Yeah, thank you. And the next one I'm going to read, some of you may also have seen. It's called Delicious Gone. And it was inspired by this quote I saw in the newspaper, and I'm going to read it to you. It was a picture, too, which I wish I had, because there's this great screen right here, and you can see. For the inaugural exhibition, the artist Emily Katrensic is eating the wall that separates the gallery space from the bedroom of its director, Luki Kaisers. And that was from the New York Times. And there was a picture of this woman eating the wall. So, delicious gone. It's a process only a woman could conceive, a hungry woman, because every woman answers to hunger. What we feed our bones, what we slave and give away. Our intimacy comes with tiny teeth marks, and we like it that way. We build small rooms and then eat them slowly. Digestion equals privacy. That calcium sulfite is an ingredient of drywall is a bonus. I didn't plan on eating everything on my plate. It was in the way of the table, which was in the way of your lap. I imagined the breaking through, what it must taste like. I pretend it in my mouth. Last gasp of wall, then holy roundness of nothing. First crumble of exposure. I prefer cast concrete. It has a more permanent flavor. You can taste the iron. Women can't get enough iron, I read. Monthly bleeding makes it popular. There is nothing between us that you won't smell on my breath eventually. This is what we look like when we're eating, flushed and focused, flagrant. I'm better at taking things away. Confession equals digestion. We are full of evidence. We are genius bulimics, sculptors of absence. Delicious gone. This one was inspired by, do you remember those books? They were like, how to survive this, how to survive that. They were all these little drawings and then the title. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm sure there's a better, but they were directions. I see a couple heads. Well, this particular one, again, and this was an assignment for the writing group. This particular one was how to jump from a bridge or cliff into a river. It was really directions. I have rewritten them. I think mine are much more helpful, but so if you like them, let me know. I'll give them to you in case you never know when you need to know how to jump from a bridge or cliff into a river. 1, be proactive. Jump before anyone else has even considered it. 2, boredom, anxiety, physical challenge, political refuge, hunger. Everyone else is. 3, laminate these directions. Then, when you encounter the occasion to jump from a bridge or cliff into a river, you'll have waterproof notes showing you how. 4, be more sacred than scared. Bow your head, clasp your hands, hover above the water, pray, Our Father who art a river, how shallow it be, thy name. 5, transform from a bullet into a dragonfly. 6, midair, your hair, a floating pile of flames. 7, I am jumping from my forehead into my big toe. I am jumping from my 20s into my hundreds. I am jumping from my coffin into my window box. I am jumping from my confusion into my convertible. 8. This is called The First Months After the First Months, and it begins with a conversation with my son, Leo, who at that time was 3. Leo, do you know Hannah Rand? Me, I do. Is she in your band? No, I'm in my band. Is there anyone else in your band? A bunch of little Leos. Is that the name of the band? No, that's who's in the band. A bunch of little Leos? Yes. Do they all play the same instrument? Yes. What instrument do they play? Violin. So the whole band is little Leos playing violin? Yes. Turning and taking the blow, tires bent in, no paint chipped, no police, but a big tow truck, a gentle tow truck, a ride back and home, a lovely gesture, a body shop, a system, an insurance card, a number, another number, a tiny piece of paper with so many numbers, and a friend, an old friend blocking the harsh wind. I take the sugar hit for him, eating the sugar babies out of his birthday take-home gift bag after he is in bed. I take as many hits as I can for him, his perfect 3-year-old body hit-free. I am not myself today. I am parakeet, sea otter, little ducky. I am staring at salty waves beyond where private is safe, where public is open, because my son and my father, my mother, because I don't have to know. How can we feel strong? Trusting something will not end, then letting it end and trusting that. Solstice, summer. Leo, we have giant birds with red breasts in the blooming tree out front. They land and the green bends. When you landed on my head, my heart, my whole world bent and shimmered green and light to hold you. And I am permanently open now since you fell in. I am permanently open now since you fell in and I fell in after you. And the world has woven itself into something like a net to hammock us while we sleep and until we wake each morning. We wake each morning, we wake each morning and say, yes. And I'd like to close with this piece. Blackbird. Blackbird, I followed you past 5 window screens, then watched you land and dive, and when out of something to watch you through, I closed my eyes to see you fly. We move in twos, and your lonely cry woke new the day, so it had no choice but to break away and find another. Not merely an echo, but a lover, hoping to go where your wings know no other home. Like you, my road lies ceaselessly blue, and I question a sky unable to hide the way we are born, this ache for more than just ourselves to waken to. And someone in our final hour who knows the total of our lives, how high we flew and how we wept when we met our other and we knew. Thank you so much.
My name is Quraysh Ali Lansana. This is my very good friend, Dr. Christopher Stewart. This book, The Walmart Republic, which is on sale along with Cin's book in the back, this book is 17 years in the making. And the Walmart Republic, to tell you very briefly, there's a map on the front of the book. Christopher was from Dallas but raised in Chicago. I'm from Enid, Oklahoma. How many of you can find Oklahoma on a map? You, I don't believe. Everybody else, you're good. We were both born in post-Kennedy, post-King America in this region of the world that is often referred to as the Southwest. But we don't really agree with that tag because Oklahoma and Texas really aren't the South, and they're really not West, right? And so we theorized many years ago that actually we are from a region that its southernmost border is Houston, its northern border, the Dakotas, and it's bordered coastally by Pennsylvania and Nevada, and that this is the Walmart Republic. If you remove the 16 to 17 largest cities from this swath of middle America, what do you have? You have a homogeneous zone, you have a similarity of idea, similarity of ethnicity, similarity of mind. And where shopping center becomes community center, becomes political center, becomes something other than where you go to shop. There are more Walmart. Walmart was a country, it would be, I think, the eighth largest country in terms of per capita income in the United States. That's how large Walmart is. And we won't even get into its politics. But we are from this region of the world. It's not all bad, it's not all good, but we are of it. So this book questions this region, celebrates it, explores it, has difficulty with it, but we are it. And so this book is here, 17 years in the making. We're very happy to be here to share it with you.
Cin, you're wonderful. Mark, I wish I could have seen you this morning, and it's great to be out here at COD. My name is Christopher Stewart. I'll be starting us off tonight, and Quraysh and I are human, although some people may disagree with that sometimes.
No.
We love applause, but we round already. This is good. We work in a round-robin way as we're reading poems from this book, so we ask you, we hope that you feel applause, but that you express that at the end of our performance or reading. So
If you're feeling it. Yeah.
at the end. Buick. In the November dusk, a rusted white Buick wrecks the quiet of West Diversey Parkway. A tattered dime store American flag hangs from the jagged hole where the antenna used to be. The Hulk turns left on Austin Avenue, heading north towards Wisconsin, where the snow already covers the cornfields in Iowa County, harvested in October, left to dream of seeds in May. The slow sound of breathing metal wheezes in the autumn air as he pulls out of sight. We get home, watch Thursday night sitcoms, and get on with the work of fattening up for winter.
There's a series in the book, the second section in the book, a series I wrote on a hot front porch in Oklahoma a couple of summers ago called Bible Belted. This is Bible Belted Faith. I harbor reasons to kill, pain, history, and blood. Don't know why I have not.
Dallas, 1978. For some, memory is a crowded construction site. They pause with their children and speak of what will be, marvel at the tower cranes swinging steel beams like toys in the still summer sky, which is at once shapeless and formed, limitless and lined. Others see what was lost, histories in alleyways and fried fish joints, a bramble of storefronts where one could buy orange juice and cigarettes, Mexican incense and Polish sausage. When my brother split his knee on the Peak Street sidewalk, we thought the world would end. I picked the glass out of the wide cut and wrapped the injury in my t-shirt. In solidarity, he took his shirt off too. We made the best of it, belting out 99 bottles of beer on the wall as we stiff-legged down Gaston Avenue for home, past the pawn shops and jukebox bars, where we would sometimes crack a door and stare into the cool dark, wanting to fall into it, be taken by it, as if willing our futures to be. By the fall, I had moved to Chicago with my mother. He stayed behind with my father, who took him out of East Dallas to a subdivision north of the city, where new ranch homes were trimmed with salvaged common brick from felled buildings in cities like Toledo, Cleveland, and Detroit. The years would pass, separated by conflicts and terrors from wars we didn't start. Ragged skirmishes, really, though a boy couldn't tell, and a boy had to choose sides to survive. We traveled into manhood as strangers, where I struggled to remember the names of his children, who would not recall that afternoon on Gaston Avenue when we shared the same wound in a city, already forgetting we were there.
Bible belted good news. The evidence of things not seen, I believe. It's what I have that is unbelievable. Trail of tears revisited yearly. Sam Walton worship. Niggas, the evil root and cash crop.
Poverty in the library lobby. She is a dangle of waiting, this little girl, stone-faced in a grubby t-shirt and 2 small gym shoes as her mother hollers over the payphone at the electric company, the landlord, the last man who walked out on her, the way my sisters and me shivered the shame of the same public scene in outgrown clothes while my mother shouted down ex-husbands and bad debt in motel lobbies off state roads, the interstates left behind, discount store return desks, truck stops, food stamp offices. It gets better, child. I know how you hate yourself this morning, but when you remember, you will count the thin blessing of humiliations in front of strangers. Later, they will become useful things, like a flashlight in a cluttered basement where we store things we never use, but always need. But for now, her chocolate eyes meet mine. Keep it moving, mister. Nothing to see here.
Bible belted history. Okie white men are a curious herd, never sure if cowboy or cracker, skin coated in dust from 1830 or 1921. Hard to tell, they grow whiter with age.
I come up after that. Oh, I need to open the book for this. Q, do you have a bookmark?
I don't know. What are you looking for, dude?
Which word? I have the VIP.
I've moved the bookmark, man.
This, I gotta find this.
We do. You know,
It's
this,
fine.
This
It's
is
fine.
this is a
It's fine.
20-year-old friendship.
It's fine.
See, so we can get stupid like this. Sorry, don't mind us. We're in a room full of people. Oh, I'm sorry.
Obituary for Alice. You know what? I'm gonna read an obituary. I need a drink of water for this. I think she deserves it.
This dude here. Like he's a marching band or something, right?
It's a reading glasses. These are reading glasses, so I can't. You guys are all a blur. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's just
I'm gonna sit down, man.
abstract
I'm
expression.
gonna sit
Beautiful.
down. It's your show. Go ahead. Do your thing.
Obituary for Alice Marie Smith. Those of your kind that are left will line the pews at First Presbyterian in blue Chanel suits that hang from their spindly bodies like Old Glory on a windless January day. They will cough politely, be assisted by their 60-year-old children, cry tears of dust and aerosol. 2. 1942. His P-47 falls into the ocean. He writes from a field hospital in Samoa. The atoll was shark-infested, his face and chest hammered into the pole stick, blood and the rest of it left behind as he crawls from his wrecked ship. A long, soundless night, save for the tumble of the sea and his chanting the sweetheart's name he gave you at Lake Texoma in the summer of '39. It kept him alive. He left a son with you. You would see his face there, and you would seethe. 3. The Reverend Tyler Johnson will officiate, but you will direct. The local mortician will do you up nice, pry the last smirk from your lips, fold your lank fingers over a frigid patch of skin where your heart used to be. There will be thin eulogies that dissolve in the air above the rafters. Your curriculum vitae will be read between the lines in names of places like Gate City, Virginia, United Daughters of the Confederacy, Order of the Eastern Star, Daughters of the American Revolution, and no one in that fearful crowd will afford the irony of a woman so vainglorious of her ancestry, yet so repulsed by those whose ancestry she will be. 4. 1967, you sent toy guns for Christmas. My mother threw them away. Tet, the following year. 5. 1991, we met once, you and me, at my father's funeral. We shook hands. We shook hands. The sum total of us. 6. When November comes in North Texas, not so much as a quail will stir around your grave. Toss a hand of dry dirt over the coffin, boys. Watch it sift over the cool mahogany and fall away. Nothing ever grew there. Nothing ever will.
Bible-belted math. Begins with a quote from El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. Pro-black doesn't mean anti-anything. There are at least 27 white people I love. I counted. 4 from high school, 5 from undergraduate years, maybe 3 from grad school, 1 gay equal bonus points. And an assortment of compelling melanin-deprived miscreants in Chicago and countrywide. 2 brothers in the afterlife remain why I add rather than subtract.
Some form poems. A sonnet. Afternoon in East Humboldt. Someone nailed a milk crate to the phone pole, hammered a piece of plywood on the back, so the North Block kids got a round ball goal. In the alley, it's a place on the map for a pee-wee hoop less than 6 feet high. So the neighborhood enforces the rules. You won't see warriors over 5 feet try dribbling here opposite some shorty fool. It's left for the first and second graders who arrive after school in the sweet hours between corduroy and the deal makers. I've watched them become Campbell Street's power, hawking loose rocks while the concrete ages beneath them. History turns the pages.
You know, I just thought about this. That might be the first sonnet ever written about crack.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know, maybe not. Maybe not. For a very learning year, when I was in Oklahoma, the first 25 years of my life, the 23rd year of my life, I worked at the CBS affiliate in Oklahoma City as an assignment editor. I helped determine what was news for hundreds of thousands of Oklahomans. This happened while I was working at this CBS affiliate. And it's too odd to be make-believe. I'm not that inventive. Klan March. Perhaps in a sincere gesture of protest, the managing editor decided it best I welcome the grand imperial wizard to Channel 9. Guide him back to the senior producer's glass cube, where he would proceed to engage in heated words with the general manager, whose robe hung upstairs on the executive suite door. Neither of us offered our hands. Staffers gathered around me at the desk for a better view of the meeting, questioned the cause for vein pop and venom bleed through office walls, summer sun redefining our faces.
Shipwreck. Past the Riverwalk, where the water's edge turns to dust and gravel, and the skyscrapers seem as far away as money. A man who calls the city his own suddenly feels small, the way an Iowa kid must feel when he stands in the parking lot of a shopping mall that was his family's farm before he left for his college years. The way a poet feels when he thinks of the years before time caught up with his home, before the hotels and luxury condominiums cast their empty shadows over this staid river, before the docks turned into amusement parks lined with Ferris wheels and gift shops selling tiny porcelains of the freighters and iron boats that used to anchor in this harbor, before the restaurants named after fictitious widows of shipwrecks that never sank here but died the slow deaths of tired boats and proud men whose hands grew calloused with age and industry. There was a city here, a city that cast pig iron, built railroads, meat, and refrigerators, shipped jazz and trumpets in the embryo of rock and roll from the silent smile of a blues man's lips. Writers celebrated its power, its swaggering, boastful power, always spoiling for a fight, another prairie, something to build. From its breakfast table on Long Island, the world called it crude. The ships, squat and ugly, fit only for those who could not sail. The music, vulgar. The women, soiled. The men, ignorant. The sky, thick with ash and despair. And the city laughed, spitting soot and oil from the gaps between its front teeth. The city laughed. A poet's job is to remember. He thinks as he crushes out his cigarette on the new concrete beneath him. And poets remember the strangest things, the way Lydia Macaulay's lips felt smooth, the way a rose petal feels smooth when it's found in a sea of scrub weeds, when he kissed her for the first time under the Dearborn Street Bridge in 1962 as the salt barges slid quietly by in the October night. The way the streets smelled like fish and oil. The way the subways weren't called orange, purple, and green, but were named for streets and neighborhoods. Jackson Park, Douglas Park, Howard, Lake, Inglewood, so that one had names and history to help him make sense of his journeys. The way nobody cared when the teenagers played on the rusted beaches at night. The way townhome developments with names like University Village and Urban Manor wouldn't dare show their faces on Halsted and Maxwell Streets so that one could still get lost there, wandering among the stolen hubcaps and the smell of grilled onions. It's been a long afternoon. His legs are tired, and he wonders how all of this happened. The way an older man may wake in the night, reaching blindly for an image of himself as a boy that left him moments before in a dream. The way he catches colds easily now, falls short of breath as he walks up the iron staircase to Upper Wacker Drive, how he's grown tired of saying goodbye to dread the sound of an unringing phone. There was a city here, he says to himself as he steps out into the concrete towards his hotel. The last chords of daylight surrender noiselessly behind the December sky. I remember now. There was a city here.
I'm gonna read Sunday at Mother's, and then you should read the last poem, and we should be done. I am the youngest of 6 children. My mother was the second oldest of 7. I have 150 living relatives on my mother's side alone. I don't know all their names. Don't quiz me. I'm working on it, though. This is a poem about a ritual from my childhood. And the poem is called Sunday at Mother's. Mother was my grandmother, my mother's mother. And the poem begins with a quote from Anna Mother Lawrence. Boy, don't you kick that ball in the garden. If you kick that ball in the garden one more time, I'ma tan your little brown hiney. We could hardly wait for crusty old Reverend Jenkins' final amen, so the real Sunday afternoon could commence. Fried chicken and fresh catfish, Aunt Maudell's potato salad, Aunt Bonnell's cakes. Fresh corn on the cob and green beans from Mother's garden. More than a plot of plowed soil, this was community center, where her children worked sad earth, where her grandkids destroyed it 50 yards away. She sat on the sagging porch lifted by 4 high cinder blocks to watch the Sabbath unfold. Almost unholy how worship affects young black appetites, but my cousins and me were squirming in choir pews for one reason. Wasn't the Holy Spirit or soul food. It was kickball. No game ever completed, always some form of tragedy. Pam skinning up her knee, Chucky throwing the ball hard upside Ray's head, or losing Skipper to the kitchen. He ate everything, all the time. Once he made a salad dressing sandwich on white bread. Man, that's some nasty stuff. You a sandwich eating meathead empty shoe. Another time in the kitchen, 2 nieces and a nephew were covered from head to toe in chocolate. It was X-Lax. Fear upon entering Mother's bathroom. Sometimes the light chain stuck, pulling, trying to hit the stool because you knew a whooping was coming if you missed. An old maple traced the window, the inside of your pants warm and sticky. When Mother joined the ancestors, Jaybird moved into her house, front porch supported by the same cement squares. Cousins Jaybird, Chucky, and I sitting around, chilling, It didn't feel right, but I wasn't afraid to use the toilet.
All right, we're going to finish up with this, with a poem called Chicago. It's not a trademark name, like I think Sandberg would understand. East Texas, split barbed wire on the side of Mr. Pickering's pasture. 2 spent steer chewing dandelions and dirt. My brother and me cutting our backs on trench posts because we wanted to break into something that broiling summer. We'd be run out of here soon enough. Tumble out of town in a rented truck, my mother jittery for the anonymity of the interstate, northbound on I-35, until we ran out of borders, and all that was left were the refineries on Ogden Avenue and the gray lights of a northern skyline built with the last laths of American steel in the years before anyone thought it would shimmer again. She talked us in to a travel lodge on Sheridan Road. Fell asleep for weeks to chase the nightmares away, woke us up with subway tokens and vague directions to explore, roared our way all the way to 135th Street. Even the cops said, "Welcome home."
Nicely done, dude. Thanks, Tom, and thank all of you.
So, are a lot of these based on or about your actual lives?
From the Walmart Republic, all of these poems are autobiographical, I would say. I mean, there are, I would say that certainly all of the poems that I've written in the poem are based on real experiences. Yeah, and I would think the same for you, pretty much, right?
Inspired by real life events.
That sounded like a Hollywood answer, didn't it?
And yes, it's not true. I've tried sometimes to lie in poems or to make them be about something, and the poem always tells the truth. So, yeah.
It's true. Your art will tell on you, right?
It will.
Your art will tell on you. It's true.
The art is smarter than the artist.
Always.
Madeline.
Always. Always. Another question? Yes.
When did you first consider yourself a poet?
Ooh, you start with that. That's go to ladies first.
Oh, you know what? I used to have a really hard time with that. I have a hard time owning it, even though, I'm surrounded by poets and what is that? That made me afraid to say it out loud. And now, I proudly put it on my taxes, poet, $3,000 a year or some crazy thing, right? Because they'll believe that.
The IRS says audit anyway.
Yeah.
Right? I think just probably maybe after the first book, there's some sort of sense of that. Although growing up as a poet in Chicago, it was the performance scene. It was a Green Mill that really was school, and we were doing it. There was still some piece about seeing the work in print or having something to hand somebody. Not always having the reading be in a bar or a coffee house.
Right.
That started, yeah. But I think the very first time I did a gig, and someone paid me like $20 or something, and I was like, yes, I felt like a poet in that moment with that $20 bill in my hand.
Rizzo?
Well, all four of us were very active in the performance scene at often at different times. Actually, all simultaneously at one time. It was a wonderful scene in the late '80s through the late '90s, and of course, still is. It's a little bit different now. The three of us worked with musical ensembles, bands.
That's right.
So when I'm writing and just composing, primarily writing narrative, of course, I always find myself reading it to myself to see how it works rhythmically with the breath. The sonnet. What do they say about the sonnet? That's the perfect. I don't write a lot of sonnets, but that's the length of the human breath.
Right.
The 10 syllables. But so it's really important to read your work to yourself, to read it aloud. At least that's the tradition. I don't
Yeah.
speak for that we
Someone
came up
walked in
in.
at me in the bathroom just before the
Yeah.
reading, reading a poem to myself in the mirror.
And you thought she was crazy and you wanted to leave and get as far away from this strange woman as possible.
Doing it.
I don't know. I think that because we evolved, and certainly, and from sort of the spoken word, though I don't like that phrase, but sort of from the spoken word performance community, and then to the page, though I think all of us were reading published poets, in those years and prior to those years. I don't know that. I always said that I wrote poetry, but I don't know that I ever started calling myself a poet, referring to myself as a poet, till very recently. I think it's an earned title. I think there are many people who write poetry, but there are fewer people who are poets. And I actually think that someone may have told me you're a poet, and I believed them finally. And that might have been after my 5th book. I don't know. It was recent, though. It's very recent.
A question.
Is there a question? Where? Yes.
At what point, after you've written so much poetry, you come to the conclusion that you want to publish a book containing all of the works, or specific works that kind of theme? What was the process that had that come to fruition?
For this book in particular, for Walmart, or? That's a great question. We started Walmart, as I mentioned, we had a reading at the Art Institute when we first conceived of this idea in 1997. And so we had been writing poems again with Christopher's story, his narrative, his personal journey, mine, and then how we sort of see the world, right, collectively and individually. And we had a pretty shabby manuscript about 15 to 13 years ago. And then we both got lost in academia for a minute. We both went to grad school. He became a dean. I ran the Brooks Center. Then we both walked away from our administrative posts in academia and returned to faculty. And I think when we both made that move, it was sort of time for me to grab him and say, "You're a poet. Remember that?" And so we sort of scrapped those old poems, many or most of mine, all of mine. He held on to a few of his, and sort of re-envisioned the manuscript. So I'm not sure I've answered your question, though. It does. Does it? Okay. All right. I'm sure. I thought I went to Texas or something and came back. Is there another question? Yes.
How do you go about editing your poems? Because I find it hard for myself.
Well, I do think, you've got to have people around you that you admire their work, that you want to strive to write
Like them.
Not like them, but they move you. If someone whose work moves you, because you want your work to move people. So you need at least a couple people that you can really trust. You need to be able to just not look at them for a while, right?
Yeah.
Just put them away for as long as you can, really. It's amazing what distance and time will do.
Right.
That you can really detach from your own work. Because, I haven't written in any other genres other than poetry, but, when a poem first happens, it is kind of like, whoa. Where did that come from, right? Of course, everyone's going to want to publish it and hear it, and they're going to want copies of it, and then it's not true, right? Then you find out it's not true, and then you're like, oh, God, it sucks, and then you throw it away, and then that's the process for a while. But if you can really just give yourself space, give yourself a couple people that you trust, then you'll start hearing your voice.
Right.
You'll start knowing. I think the first time that I had a writer's group and I brought a poem in for critique, and they were really picking at it and making suggestions, but the thing was, is I knew that actually it was done. And I finally had a sense of, I know when it's done, I know when it's not done, and you'll start trusting your own voice. So give yourself time to just doing it.
Start it over and over again. That's how I do it. A poem. I believe that poems, you have to have a good idea to have a good poem, So it has more in common than some people would like to admit to something like screenwriting, particularly if you're writing narrative poetry, right? And there's a story there. But I find myself working on I have multiple pieces going, and don't stop if you have a good stream of consciousness going. Circle something and say better word, new word, question mark. If it's some cliche, you don't really want to use it, and just keep going to get the idea out, because I think it starts with something that's very true from your experience and very real, and often very emotional. And if you get that down, right, the carving can take weeks, sometimes months, but the carving will happen and it will be finished.
Love the carving.
Yeah.
The editing process. Now poetry in particular, really getting it down till every word in a sentence. Does this word need to be here? Does this word need to be here? And take it word by word like that.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to, computers are great now because you can have multiple versions,
Right.
right? You can delete a chunk and let it stand back, put it back in.
Yeah.
Revision is the most important part of the creative process, period, right? And save all of your drafts. You've heard both of them say that. Save all of your drafts.
Because the first one always ends up being really.
Yeah. And I'd probably on the average about 15 to 20 drafts of a single poem. And it's probably around the 10th draft that I shared with him or someone else I respect. But I'm in it for a while before I decide to share it with anyone. And certainly even a while longer before I decide that I feel like it's ready to go into the world in some form. So take your time, right? Take your time. Yes. Who'd you pick? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Writers, who was your favorite person from childhood as a writer? Who was your favorite writer, poet or author from your childhood that you remember?
For me, it was Madeline L'Engle. My 6th grade teacher read us, our class, A Wrinkle in Time, and I was just enthralled. And then just amazingly, right when I graduated college, I got to take a workshop with her at Mundelein.
Wow.
And it was like 5 women. And I don't know how I even got in. And Madeline L'Engle, I don't know if you know who she is. She's just... she's best known for her children's book, but she's one of those writers that her spirit goes all the way down into the earth and all the way up into the heavens. And so that really is her.
It's funny, I work with so many, where are my colleagues who work in children's literature? I should be able to say who earlier in life, but I was reading novels from a very early age, and I was novels, not poetry. I had some teachers along the way that sent me away from poetry as some, and then I came back to it. But I would say John Steinbeck for me. I started reading Steinbeck's books, very, very early on, in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Yeah. I was into science fiction in my youth. I was introduced to Gwendolyn Brooks, whom I had the great fortune of being mentored by for a while, for a decade. But what I was reading as a teen was primarily science fiction. Philip K. Dick, Asimov. But my greatest, I still to this day firmly believe that the greatest influence on me as a poet is this dude named Stephen Morris Wonder. You heard this dude named Stevie Wonder? He's probably my greatest influence.
Songs in the Key of Life, right?
Oh, all of them, but that one changed my life for sure.
Just a real quick question. Have you ever used music as well as your poetry to complement and to...
Well, all 3 of us have worked in bands before.
Okay.
Yeah, all 3 of us have worked in bands and worked with musicians who were not organized bands per se, but Cin was huge when I first moved to the city, right?
And mixed media and all,
And mixed
all kinds of
media and
interesting
art,
stuff, right?
yeah.
It was the 80s, the late 80s, so there was a lot of multimedia, I would have killed for a projector.
Right,
Screen this size back in the day. Lots of stuff going on, slides, and and then a poem kind of weaving in and out. It's fun. I love collaborating because, you know, I think what I really always wanted to be was a sculptor, right? I always wanted to be able to create a piece that you could just walk all the way around. And it was always kind of, I mean, performance helps poetry, but just having this kind of one-dimensional thing, you know, was really, I wanted something 3D. So collaborating really gets it off the page and really lets an audience kind of see it from all perspectives, and that really is exciting to me. It still is.
I was thinking on the way up here that Cin was one of the few witnesses, and you were there. I was in a band in the 90s called the Funky Wordsmiths with the son of Oscar Brown Jr., who's a great jazz vocalist and jazz musician. His son, Oscar Brown III, was our bass player and musical director, and he was amazing. And we played the Green Mill one night, right after the Rodney King Rebellion, and a moment that lives in Chicago poet history, I guess, from what I understand. But I was thinking about that on the way here. Like, you two are the only two people that I know, other than the folks in the band, who were in this moment. But it was quite a moment. I've not been invited to perform at the Green Mill since, put it like that.
The and I you know,
he can't stand it.
I led a group called Circadian Rhythm. Led, I suppose, the musicians. Some of them, you know, I'd ask the keyboardist, "Do you know where we are?" Yeah, Armadillos Road, Armadillos. I got, and they would compose to my work. It's this wonderful experience, and we all came up not just with bands, and there was the Funky Word in '93. We say these the halcyon days, right? In the '90s, the Funky Wordsmiths, Marvin Tate into Settlement, Circadian Rhythm. Right? David Hernandez and Street Sounds, and these were major acts, and we all headlined the Green Mill and places like that. And also,
it's major of an act as a poet.
right.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you know, no one was playing the United Center.
No,
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it was wonderful, and it's wonderful to work with musicians.
Are you a musician? Or are you a poet?
A little bit.
Yeah. I'm a poet. Are you a poet too?
A little bit.
Put them together, dude.
I was curious about the kind of a crossover from let's say the Greenwich Village, bongos type of thing, or has that ever went to Chicago? Or?
What do you mean exactly? I'm not sure.
You know, where you have
the beats,
music,
the beat movement.
Background, and plus you're giving poetry at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Down, let's say, University of New York, Greenwich Village.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the beats and from the Greenwich Village area. Yeah, I would say that moment that we had, and certainly there were predecessors in Chicago. You know, the beat movement helped in some ways give birth to the Black Arts movement and the New Eureka movement and the Chicano movement. And I consider myself a direct descendant of the Black Arts movement in terms of primarily message, not so much aesthetically. But in Chicago, certainly, Chicago was very important in that moment for all three of those movements, actually.
I think the thing that, when I think of the work that you did, I was always really aware of was that working with musicians that were extraordinary musicians, and that a good musician didn't make a bad poem a good poem, right? That both things happening, that any collaboration, we all have to meet each other at the highest place and then kind of let go of that ego and find the new place together.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't about kind of just like having some music cover it up, right? Because that's kind of...
Yeah.
So, but really challenging it to make it better, that the whole was greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, right. And that's well said. And actually that led to the demise of the Funky Wordsmiths.
Well, since I was there for some of this stuff, in response to you, I think in a way the Chicago scene kind of killed that bongo scene. I mean, that whole thing of like, you'd get a stand-up bass player who would go boom, 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 while somebody read poems, and they would call that like collaboration. Or somebody just, tapping on congas while someone read. In this case, these were full-fledged bands that composed music as people composed words, and it was real, and it it wasn't a band, it wasn't Smashing Pumpkins, it was poetry and music.
Yeah.
But it was just
Right.
more than that simple, sort of dull thing that
Sure.
it kind of killed that stuff. It was, people were
I hadn't thought about it
surprised
that way.
to hear it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought
They were
about it that way.
expecting, you know, some bass player just thumping while someone read a poem.
Right.
Right.
Right. There was a hand up in the back, young lady. Did you have your hand up?
Oh, no.
No? Okay. All right. Other questions? Yes.
Do you guys have any poem, either yours or from an artist, you guys said that poem describe my path to where I am right now?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Do you guys have any special poem or poem, either yours or from other artists that this is my poem, this describe me?
That is a great
It is.
question. Yes. It is a poem, I mean, there's more than one, but
Yeah.
this is the first poem that I remember thinking, oh, I should have written this poem, but I could have written this poem. It made so much sense to me. It felt like it was also of my body. And it's a poem by Mark Strand, and it's called Keeping Things Whole. In a field, I am the absence of the field. This is always the case. Wherever I am what is missing. When I walk, I part the air, and always the air moves in to fill the spaces where my body's been. We all have reasons for moving. I move to keep things whole.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Mark Strand, hello.
Yeah. Chicago poet.
Poet laureate.
Yep. You?
I can't recite it in my head. There was a poet that I remember very distinctly that's taught me that poems could tell stories and they could be narrative, and that was a poet named William Carpenter, probably not familiar to a lot of people. Well, maybe he is. And I still have his two books. They're dog-eared with notes and pictures that I would draw in them that I got 25 years ago, and that started me on my path really to narrative poetry. You can do it cleanly and in poetic form, but you can tell stories. So
Yeah.
I can't. He's got a lot of great poems. I cannot recite any of them because they're long, right?
Yeah. I used to be able to recite mine. There are probably three. There are certainly three poets who influence the way that I see. And those three poets are Gwendolyn Brooks, Miss Brooks, Miss Lucille Clifton, and Langston Hughes. And The Negro Speaks of Rivers is probably the poem that sort of flipped a switch in me. There's also a Chicago poet from the Black Arts Movement named Carolyn Rogers. Wonderful, amazing poet. Her collected works was just released a year or so ago. She unfortunately passed about 3 years ago. And she has this amazing poem about putting pennies and nickels in a Borden's glass jar, and for years, and then was able to send 3 babies out of the South Side of Chicago to college from saving money in glass jars, right? And that poem, one of the first poems that really sort of changed my whole world, right? Carolyn Rogers is her name, Chicago poet. It's a great question. Any other questions? Is everybody just, you're asleep, dude. I'm just messing with you. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for hanging out.